I lost my job last year after the divorce. My ex-wife's father owned a company. He let me go with the modest servant's package. It was a dark time. For about 6 months, I drank, morning until night. A slow, pathetic suicide. It's harder than it seems. Killing yourself, I mean. Every morning, I'd wake up like some malfunctioning phoenix. I just wanted it to be over, to descend into sweet darkness and feel nothing. Then, in September, my debit card was declined. That sound, that scratch the machine made, indicating I had no money, that even here, among my derelict peers, I was on the bottom. I began to look for jobs, any jobs. I found it on Craigslist. Substitute teacher, gifted special education. I've never been a kid person. I don't like them. I don't hate them, but I was desperate. Driving through the long, windy road to the school was like being transported in time. Jeffersonal buildings evoked a Virginian antebellum aesthetic. Tall, majestic oaks lent their shadows in the summer heat. Everyone in the area knew the school. Private, elite. Graduates went to Yale, Harvard, Wharton. 2 vice presidents and 1 speaker of the House were alumni. My Camry fell out of place in the parking lot, but like I said, I was desperate. When I walked in, the receptionist looked at me, knowing. "You're here for the substitute teaching job?" I nodded. "Come with me." She walked down a long hall, and I followed. We stopped at a large industrial door with a keypad. The numbers beeped, echoing down the hall as she typed the code in. An airlock whooshed as the door opened, and steps down into an underground area. She stopped at the top of the stairs, motioned for me to continue down. "This is as far as I go." I hesitated. Something wasn't right. This didn't add up. She sensed it. "We pay in cash. Daily." I'm not proud of it, but like I said, I was desperate. "What?" I began. "Instructions are on the table." She turned around and walked out, the door humming as it closed, settling into place with a clank. The air compressors kicked in, sealing the door. My footsteps were muted as I walked down, like something was absorbing the sound. At the bottom, a small hallway stretched out into another door, round like a hobbit door. Curious now, I walked towards it. My hands caressed it. Thick, rich wood, warm to the touch. It felt alive. To the left of the door was a small cubby with a paper. It simply read, "Rules." Underneath, "These children are special children, scholarship students who board at Westlake. For their success and your safety, the following rules must be followed. When the children start whispering, do not turn your back on them. The nurse will take them out sometimes. When they come back, do not make eye contact with them for 15 minutes. Do not try and help them after their nurse visits. Insubordination must be immediately punished by pressing the button. Your payment is in the envelope. Do not take it until the day is done. Failure to adhere will absolve management of responsibility for harm." Weird, but there was an envelope under the end sheet with 7 crisp $100 bills. The lure of quick cash overriding any misgivings I had. Just then the bell rang. I walked into the hobbit door, which was now cracked open. Inside was a classroom. Oddly enough, the children filed in from another entrance. 27 of them. Second graders. They seemed normal, and just a little quiet. A folder on my desk had my lesson plans for the day. I began teaching. At around 10 a.m., the children had recess. They exited their door. I watched the window as they ran outside onto a lawn and began running back and forth. Suddenly, it struck me. We were underground. Or so I thought. How was this level with the ground outside? Maybe the rear of the school went downhill, and I just hadn't noticed it as I came in. When they came back in, their energy was lower. I was writing on the chalkboard when it started. A faint whispering. like the rustling of leaves. My hand froze on the chalkboard. I tried to turn, but I was stuck. The whisper grew, like bees, angry humming, swarming. The lights dimmed, taking on a late. The lights dimmed, taking on a late evening glow. Heart hammering, I summoned all the will and moved my head about a quarter of an inch. On the edge of my vision, a shadowy form loomed where the first desk was. As I looked, it coruscated into one of the students. The whispers grew angry, but I felt its grip on me loosen. I moved my head further, and more shadowy forms congealed into young children. I wrenched my neck, facing the class. The sound shattered, and everything became normal. The lights brightened. After a long moment, one of the boys raised his hands. Yes. I didn't know his name.
Johnny.
He said. Yes, Johnny.
The answer's 7.
It took me a moment, then it struck me. He was solving the problem I had written on the board. Like nothing ever happened.
That's correct.
Just then, the bell rang. I looked at the clock. Somehow it was 2:45, dismissal time. 2.5 hours had just disappeared. I watched as these children, who had just moments ago been something else, as they stood up and ran out the door. I felt lucky to be alive, grabbed the envelope, ran up the stairs, through the compression of the doors. As I walked out, I saw her. She looked surprised.
You're alive.
I nodded.
Yes. Okay. See you tomorrow?
I touched the wad of cash in my pocket, thought about the party I'd been throwing tonight.
Yeah.
I said, walking out into the afternoon. The sun was warm, but as I looked at the school, my heart skipped in my chest. Behind it, hills rose into the Blue Ridge Mountains. The wind blew, the rustle of the leaves like a whisper. My blood ran cold. I needed a drink. The whoosh of the air, the click of the door as it locked into place. It's kind of funny when you think about it. The oddities of life that can become habitual, normalized is what our couples therapist called it when I was coupled and in need of therapy. Even the slight pressure change in my ears, like when I dived deep down in the lake at my grandma's place. It was a small lake. I wanted to see how deep it would go. So I'd swim down into the dark until my lungs screamed for air. I wanted desperately to reach the bottom, to find solid ground in the murky black. But it always kept going down, and when I'd swim upwards, breach the surface, lungs gasping, I'd tell myself, next time. I felt that nostalgic pressure against my ear as I descended the stairs. Funny, I hadn't thought about my childhood in years. Loretta was her name. The woman in the office at the school. She looked at me strangely when I stepped back into her office 2 days ago.
I didn't think you'd be back,
she remarked. It was one of those comments you don't really have the correct response to.
Money's good.
And it was. In 3 days, $2,100. My landlord was shocked when I handed her the cash.
I don't even know how you got this cash,
she said, worryingly, pocketing my rent. No, you don't, I thought. But I won't be homeless for at least 2 more weeks. She laughed, as if I said something funny.
Money's good,
she repeated, then stood and touched my arm, like a caress. As we walked towards the door, it felt intimate. I realized I hadn't been touched like that in, well, I can't even remember how long. So I came back, and again. Nothing had happened out of the ordinary, whatever this new ordinary was. I obeyed the rules, stood sideways while writing on the board. Today, when I reached the bottom, that feeling of swimming through the darkness stayed with me. I approached the hobbit door. I reached for the handle when I noticed the paper had moved. The list of rules, glancing at it, there was a change. The nurse will take them out sometimes. When they come back, do not make eye contact for 15 minutes. Do not try and help them after the nurse's visit. Odd. these two had been underlined. There was a slight visual disorientation walking into the room, knowing there were mountains behind the class, mountains I had seen moments ago. Internally, we extrapolate out what should be happening, expectations of how the world will proceed along a given path. Yet, the windows open to a field that should have been, in my estimation, a good 20 or 30 feet underground. I'm not sure I'll ever normalize that. After recess, the kids ran back into the room, seemingly normal. They sat down, and I stared into our math lesson. When I'm writing on the chalkboard, with the kids in my peripheral, I can see the Hobbit's door, but my back's to their entrance. I was going through subtraction and remainders when the hair on my arms stood on end. The air felt changed, like the moments before a lightning strike. The children were utterly still, not a single movement. Turning, I saw her, the nurse, tall, almost perfect features, but when you looked at them, the features seemed to swim, like an AI rendering of a human, where the image is constantly being generated. Even now I can't conjure a picture of her in my head. With her entrance, the whispers came, not directly, but around the edges of my conscious. The children, in unison, turned their heads and watched a young, dark-haired girl in the third row stand and walk forward, her face blank, emotionless, her body relaxed. But her eyes seemed to scream for help. Tears welled at the corners. I wanted to grab her, hug her, protect her, and keep her safe. The other children had followed her path in unison, feeling the fear for her, with her, all as one. Suddenly, I desperately wished I knew her name. It was contemporary, I had told myself. Don't get attached. So I had made a conscious decision not to learn their names, besides Johnny, who I tried to forget. I made up my mind to earn my money, then leave behind this place and whatever evil lurked within its walls. But watching this child walk, frightened, towards the grotesque creature, I couldn't help myself. My mouth opened in protest, to say what I have no clue. Like a striking viper, the nurse's head snapped towards me. The charge in the room grew to an overwhelming crescendo. She seemed to grow closer, larger, as I felt the pressure of my brain swelling against my soul, the fluid in my eyes bulging. An artery deep in my head began to expand, balloon outwards, the weak link in some biological chain, straining to the limit. Then the children turned, as one, towards the nurse. The whispers grew in intensity. There was a terrorist standoff happening, something way beyond my ability to grasp. With my life hanging in the balance, whatever darkness they had within, the darkness that had almost consumed me, they were now turning this darkness on her. A look of confusion crossed the nurse's face. Then the girl reached the nurse. Despite her fear, she reached up, took the nurse's hand. The nurse held her gaze on me, internal pressure building for a long moment. I was on the edge of consciousness, barely holding on, waiting for death. Then abruptly, it stopped. I collapsed into my chair, mind swimming. The little girl looked back at me, and the last thing I really remember is the concern in her eye. Concern for me, and the amenity on the nurse's face. I don't remember the bell ringing, leaving, walking up the stairs, just the hiss of the door behind me and the click as it locked into place. I do know the little girl didn't come back into the class that day. I resolved to find out her name. Tomorrow, learn all of their names. They were dangerous, for sure. But maybe they were children. For God's sakes, maybe they were victims, too. Outside Loretta's door, I opened the envelope. In it was 10 crisp $100 bills. I poked in my head.
I'm not complaining, but
I said, holding out the money. Loretta looked up.
hazard pay? Is that common?
She looked at me, amused.
From all the children, yes.
Her eyes sparkled with mirth. Come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. I kept expecting her face to shift, like the nurse.
They like you, though.
She smiled, flirtatiously. Seductive. Human. I could feel her hand on my shoulder from earlier and ached for that touch. Any human connection. Walking outside, the evening breeze carried a faint sharpness of fall. I took a deep, cleansing breath, deep into my lungs. It dawned me that twice in that past week I had nearly died within those walls. In retrospect, this was my last chance to leave, consequence-free, to avoid anything that came after. Any normal person would have walked away right there and then. Just one more week, I told myself, and I'll go. $3,500, plus the $1,000 from today. That would set me up for a few months, plus Loretta. The leaves rustled, whispering their approval. One more week, whispering at the edges of my consciousness. Not just the leaves. Stay a little longer, they said. The whispers. I shivered against the cold, against their presence, against the nurse, against Loretta. Deep down, my bones cried out for a drink. For just a while, I didn't want to feel anything. Sweet oblivion. The whoosh of the air, the lock clicking into place. Our lives are governed by cycles. The fundamental aspect of cycles lie in repetition. That is its very nature. As we sink into these cycles in our lives, day in, day out, the familiarity can even transmute into a source of comfort. Whoosh, click. We can become used to just about everything, I suppose. Lorraine's laugh, the way she tilted her head up at me just so. Visits from the nurse. How that little girl came back. Enough cycles and even the strangest of circumstances settles into normalcy. We don't recognize that the same walls that comfort are the walls which imprison. Golden shackles binding us to the ever-turning wheel. Whoosh, click. Until the day that something jolts us out of it, something shocking, breaking the rhythm, upsetting the pattern. I made a solemn oath to myself that Friday would be my last day of work, and this one I would keep. My bank account. I had a bank account with a positive balance. Whoosh, click. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The last time we spoke, I believe, was the day the little girl was taken by that thing. Tuesday, I believe. My thinking is getting clearer, but my memory grows hazier. A cognitive myopia, mentally nearsightedness. Even that, I use these fancy words, but I can't remember my ex-wife's face clearly. I hadn't slept well after the nurse took her. A brush with death can have that effect. Tossing and turning, every time I drifted off, I felt that vein in the back of my head, deep within, pulsing, throbbing. They say that after someone loses a limb, they still have the sensation of that limb being there. Phantom limbs, it's called. That was occurring in the back of my head, the memory of a sensation, still firing the electrical charge across the neural synapses. Consciousness is such an odd thing. We rarely notice it until it goes wrong. I must have fallen asleep because I woke to my phone ringing. It was my ex-wife and her lawyer, wanting to finalize some elements of the divorce. When I tried to see her face, it was blurry in my mind. This was a woman I had known since we were 14. She was family. Not in the I married her sense, but in the God, it makes me sad. Thinking about her, feeling that hole in my life. Visceral, like someone ripped the sinews from my bones. I can feel it. Her, but can't see her face. The memory of where she used to be pulsed, but I couldn't see her. Driving to the school, through the winding mountain roads, she called. No lawyer this time.
Jeremy.
My name coming from her mouth like a stranger.
Yeah. Are you okay?
She asked, real concern in her voice.
Does it matter? You're gone.
Silence as I pulled up to the parking lot.
I have to go. Work. Jeremy.
she said. In her voice, you could still hear there was so much she wanted to say. Fear, regret, doubt, perhaps.
Take care of yourself,
Was all she could muster. That chapter was over. I knew it in my marrow. Some things, once removed, can never be put back. Despite all the king's horses and all the king's men, all Humpty could be was a tragic warning for the next thrill seeker up on that wall. Whoosh. Another turn of the cycle. Click. The door settled into place. The slight pressure against my ear as I descended the stairs. I was so early. So I sat at my desk, reviewing my lesson plan. Haven't even flirted with Lorraine. All I could see was that little girl's face, her dark curls, her soft eyes, the concern she had for me when she walked away with the nurse. Right after recess, the children all grew still. The air thickened, crackling with static. I didn't look, but I could see the shape of the nurse in the doorway, a smaller shape in front of her. The smaller shape was informous, like when the child had changed on the first day. It staggered across to the third row, with what I assumed was awkward, shuffling steps, settling into the chair 4 rows back. I wanted to look at her, to run to her, see if she was okay, but that thing wasn't her. Deep within, I knew it. I could feel the nurse's eye on me, probing, testing, like it wanted me to act up. Spoiling for a war. What were the rules? I'm pretty sure she had the paper. I'm pretty sure the paper had said wait 15 minutes. But is pretty sure certain enough in this situation? So I noted the time on the clock and kept writing on the board. The children scrolled in my periphery. After about 2 minutes, the nurse withdrew. Not walked away, just faded back into the hall like a receding tide. Then the shape that was the girl moaned, heart-rending, the anguish cry of an animal caught in a trap, the sound that awakens the protective instinct wound deep in our DNA. And I could hear the whispers, dark, angry, but this time buzzing, all in a cloud around her. After about 15 minutes, the other children began to move, slowly at first, little twitches, then shuffling. From the edges of my vision, the shape began to coalesce into a form of a little girl. Several minutes had passed since the nurse left. She moaned again, and the other children turned toward her. They let out smaller moans and squirmed uncomfortably. Sympathy pains, maybe. They seemed to feel what she was feeling. At 12 minutes, the little girl was fully there. I could see her face, her legs, the tufts out of her hair, and the end of her braids. I wanted to take her, hold her, and keep her safe. The clock ticked. Every second, an eternity. Cycles. Tick, tick, tick. Finally, 15 minutes had passed, with an extra 2 from when the nurse watched me. I felt uncomfortable, that the rule supported me. I ran to her. She lifted her chin, tears in her eyes.
Are you okay?
Wiping a tear from her cheek. The child murmured. The sound was new, like the whispers, but somehow in support.
Yes. It's just pain.
She seemed confused that I was caring.
Well, what's your name?
I asked, gently,
Mera?
softly, placing her hand on the desk. Its appearance was shocking. The index finger and middle finger's nails were deep purple, with bluish veins leading from them. She winced in pain as I lifted it, then looked at her other hand. It bore the same markings. She looked at me in wonder.
Why do you do this? You're in pain. Yes. And? Well, when you see someone suffering, you want to relieve their pain, to help them somehow.
I said. The murmurs again, louder. Johnny raised his hand.
Yeah? So, if someone is weak, you want to help them?
He said.
Yes. What else would you do?
The murmurs grew louder.
The weak are fed upon.
He answered. Just then, the dismissal bell rang. I stared as the children got up and ran out the door. Mera was last, still in considerable pain. When she got to the door, she looked at me, torn between pain and joy. She smiled. It hit me that I never seen the children laugh. They would run after each other, play games, but the key tenet of childhood was never erupted forth from their lips. She stood there for a minute in the doorway, like a wild creature observing civilization, then gone. Whoosh, click. The rain was waiting outside, in the glow of the evening. Magic hour, they call it, and the enchantment lay thick in the setting rays of the sun. She was radiant. She stepped in closer to me. I could smell her. Honeysuckle in the early fall. She took my hand.
You have kind eyes. Those children.
She squeezed my hand tighter.
They're important.
My body responded to her touch, to her smell. I fought a valiant battle against Milena of evolution.
But who are they?
She leaned in, close to my ear.
Scholarships. We offer them a better life,
she said, then let go of my hand. She looked up at me with those wide doe eyes.
You're doing an amazing job with them.
Her body brushed mine as she walked back into the school. Later, at the bar, Silvio sat next to me. He ordered a White Russian, me a beer. I paid. 2 more days, why not celebrate? Cash bulged in my pocket. Click, whoosh, the bartender opened the bottle. Symphony in reverse, the other domain cycle of my life. Click, whoosh, drink. I pressed the glass against my lips. The frigid liquid ran down my throat on the path to sweet oblivion. The bartender sat the milk carton on the bar. I froze. Beer poured out the side of my mouth.
Whoa, careful, you're gonna develop a drinking problem,
Silvio exclaimed. I coughed and choked, set the beer on the bar. Bile rose in the back of my throat as I rushed out the door, racing against nature. I stumbled to a bush. Liquid spewed from my throat as my stomach contracted over and over. Walking back into the bar, I sat down and stared.
You okay, buddy?
Silvio asked. No, I'm not. I didn't even know they still put missing children on milk cartons. I grabbed the carton and set down a large tip.
Hey, party's just getting started,
Silvio proclaimed. Not for me, I thought. For me, the party's over. Megaro's sweet face stared at me from the back of the milk carton. I knew things were about to change. A gear deep within, some ancient machinery, had ground to a halt, the cycle broken. Missing, it said. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part lay below that, where the missing synth dates were printed. September 23rd, 1992. I tasted bile in the back of my throat. Whoosh, click.